Welcome to Oklahoma Gardening with your host, Steve Dobbs.
Well, as gardeners, I think we all have a tendency to be environmentally conscientious, especially in some of the things that we're doing. But you know, in many cases, a lot of us are having to become that way because it's being enforced upon us, especially in communities where recycling and composting is becoming more and more important. And that's because we're not being allowed to take some of the grass clippings and waste from our gardens to the landfills, and really it's probably a positive move. So that's really why we initiated our demonstration on composters here in August of this year. And we did a little segment before just introducing it to you, but now we want to talk to you about some of the progress we've made, and we've received some more composting kits as well. But as a reminder, let me tell you a little bit about what we've done in the demonstration this last part of the summer and early fall. What we did, we went in and we used grass clippings, either fescue or Bermuda, from our turf, and we went in and we put layers and different amounts in the different types of composting kits. We then came in after a couple of those layers and we put in soil, and this was actually just a shovelful probably per couple of layers, just to really introduce microorganisms or bacteria in the soil to help break down the compost. And then we would mix in a couple of handfuls of nitrogen, which is real important in getting our nitrogen level up. And then we would put some water in because the moisture is real important too. Now, some of you are probably asking, what should a finished product look like in compost? And I've got a little bit laid out here. Now, you'll see some coarser materials in here, and that's because this was taken out of our 3-bin composter, where we've actually chopped up some larger pieces, branches, leaves, those types of things. But it really should look like rich soil. And so it's real powdery here because it's dry, but it really should be fine, and it's just a great thing to use as a mulch and incorporate in the soil. Now, the problem with composting is that it's not always easy depending on what product you choose, and there's some other mistakes too. And let me reiterate some of those common mistakes, and those were the principles based upon our demonstration. One is not always covering the pile, and that has to do with heating up the pile, but also regulating the moisture, whether it's irrigation or rainfall, that goes into it. Also, improper ventilation, that's really a big part of the demonstration too, to make sure that we get enough oxygen for the microorganisms to be active. Also, improper mixing. Now, some of the ones that we'll show you are actually tumblers where you can turn the composters real easily, but there's a few as well that aren't so easy to turn, and so there are kits or tools on the market now, such as these compost turners, and they've got a couple of prongs on the bottom there, and when you push it down into the compost and you pull it up, they come out, the wings do, and that catches the material, and as you bring it up, it helps distribute the material a little bit more and makes it easier without having to shovel it. So that's kind of a lazy man's compost tool, but it will work if you're pretty careful in how you're using it. And of course, the other thing is making sure the materials are shredded up finely so they'll compost a little bit quickly. And then, just the mixing of the pile is real important. So we've tried some of these things this summer, but one thing that we want to tell you is, many cases, some of you have just gobs of material that you can fill up these kits pretty easily. Others may be putting in layers at a time, and that's really the basis of our demonstration. We've put in a little bit at a time, and we'll show you some of those results. But as far as the compost activators, most of these kits that we have their own type of activator that they sell as well. And we haven't used any of those in our demonstration this year. Again, remember, we use the regular soil. Now, we know sometimes that's not easy to get your hands on, and a lot of times it makes it even heavier when you're trying to compost by putting in heavy clay soil like we have here in the Stillwater area. So this demonstration, we're really putting a lot of emphasis in it, and we'll try a little bit during the winter months with some of the ones that are going to hold a little bit more heat. But next spring and summer, we'll actually be doing the demonstrations with the activators, and then we'll compare the results with our soil. So now let me take you around and just show you a few of the composters. We don't have enough time to cover them all, and some of them came in a little bit too late to be included in the fall demonstration. But we found some interesting results. So let me show you what we've come up with. Earlier I referred to some of the types of composters that we have as tumblers, and really what it is nothing more than a barrel or a drum that's designed where you can actually turn it. And let me open this up inside and show you that it has mechanisms inside to help stir it as you're turning it. And this particular one has holes in the bottom to help catch tea, compost tea. Now this one we received a little bit later, so we really haven't included it in this fall study, although we are taking some temperature. But this is one we'll talk about a little bit later on and probably in detail next year. Now one of the ones that we've included in our demonstration is a thermal composter. And this particular one sits on the ground here, but it's got styrofoam on the inside that helps insulate it and traps in a little bit more heat. Now Steve Cheney, our horticulture work study, has been working for us to take daily temperatures and to turn these composters once a week. Now the temperature on this one this morning is about 80 degrees, but the average since we initiated this demonstration on August 3rd for this particular one has been about 107 degrees Fahrenheit. Now remember, to get good, accurate composting to kill any diseases or insects or weed seeds, you really need to have it up around 130, 140, even up as high as 180. One of the problems with this one, we still think all of the composting kits are good ones, but remember we've been putting in a little bit at a time, which a lot of homeowners have a tendency to do, and I don't think we've really generated the heat enough to really help compost. And as you can see here, we really don't have any finished product, and we've been going almost 3 months on this demonstration. A lot of these kits tell you you can get compost as much as 2 to 4 weeks. So again, I think next year our demonstration is definitely going to include where we fill them up as much as we can with the activators and see how quickly we can get them. Now as a comparison, we have our 3-bin composter here on the studio gardens, and we've got it filled pretty full with just a couple of mowings, and that temperature early this morning was up around 180 degrees. And Alan stirred it up a little bit, and you can see the steam rising from it, so you can tell it's really working and it's very hot, and that's the kind of temperature that we need. So again, putting a little bit in at a time seems to be detrimental, and that's something we want to show you, because in 3 months you'd think we would have composted something. Now let me show you another one that's kind of an unusual one. This is called the green cone waste recycler. It's really developed to put in kitchen scraps, bones, and those types of things as well, and it's buried about 18 inches into the soil, and you submit the product in the top of the cone. Now we are going to try to use it as a composter for some of the organic matter, and I want to show you kind of what it looks like. The temperature on this one is about 90 degrees, and the average was 117 during the demonstration. It generates much more heat, but obviously it's harder to turn because usually it's bolted on here, but we wanted to show you what it looks like. And it holds an awful lot of moisture, so it's really very wet, and it's almost impossible for it to break down in compost when it's this wet. So the amount of moisture is really critical. Now let's go over and look at some homemade composters as well. Well, our least expensive and probably least effective composter is just a 39-gallon trash bag that we have here. Now we've added the soil and the moisture and the traditional things just like we did on the others, and our problem here has been that there's no holes perforated, and so it's holding too much water. And let me show you what's happening. It's really not composting at all. It's just pretty much staying mud, and the grass clippings are staying too wet, and so it's hard for them to break down. Now, the other problem is the trash bags anymore are more environmentally safe too as far as breaking down, so we've had to replace this one a couple of times by keep putting them over the outside. But you can see that it's really not working that well for us, but some people have some experience with it and they recommend it. But again, I think if you fill it full right away, not add any other extra water, just let the humidity, and then it's easy to roll across the ground. You might get some success out of it, but again, in comparisons, we're not pleased with this one at all. Now the last one that I want to talk about today is another homemade one, and these are just out of pallets that we've put 4 of them side by side on their end. And again, we're putting different layers, so we've not got a finished product. You can see it is starting to break down a little bit, but we've kept the plastic over it to help generate some heat and control our moisture, but this one actually dries out too much, so it's really the exception to some of the problems we've been having, because the moisture can drain out, the wind blows through, and so we're not keeping this one quite wet enough. Again, I think next year we'll have some great results for you, because we're going to fill them full, try some different experiments, but hopefully some of these things we've shared with you today will help give you some ideas when you see a lot of these showing up in the catalogs during the next few months.
We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. You can also find more recent videos on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.